I was shocked to read recently that 9.5 million tonnes of food are thrown away every year in the UK alone. My answer to this is along the lines of W.S. Gilbert's Mikado, making the punishment fit the crime. While the Emperor of Japan planned to have those convicted of cheating at billiards play forevermore on a cloth untrue with a twisted cue, I am determined to send food wasters to sea in small yachts with no refrigeration. Food's a bit like water on a long passage. Unless you're a water maker or are an expert fisherman whose luck is permanently in, once it's gone, it's gone. So waste not, want not. Those who live on the sea, even for short periods, soon become experts at recycling food. Roz and I spent so long on the oceans without a fridge that although we're based ashore at last, we still can't bring ourselves to bin anything we can put in our mouths. When we made our home moored on the piles in mid-river off Bewley following an extended cruise, our 8-year-old daughter used to scull ashore to the village school in the morning. She'd hop down into the dinghy, togged up in official pullover and skirt, with her lunchbox tossed onto the stern sheets. I don't know what her classmates carted along to munch at midday, but Hannah's creations showed initiative. Occasionally, it might be conventional, boring cheese or ham. More often, it was the remains of last night's dinner. The shepherd's pie sandwich was a favourite. Binning the remains is still against our religion. We'd a big boat in those days and made our passages with a full crew. At sea, we'd follow the lead of the great H.W. Tillman and offer the leftovers from dinner the following morning. Tillman once stirred an already mutinous crew into open rebellion by serving curry for breakfast. He doesn't say in his book whether he directed the cook to prepare it specially to give the day a red-hot start, but in our case, curry for breakfast was a not infrequent entry on the bill of fare. Generally, we got away with it. My curries have been described by connoisseurs of subcontinental cuisine as Force 10. Some love 'em, others grumble and gasp, but there's no escape. If any is uneaten at the first round in the second dog watch, it sits on the cooker till morning, so those suffering night starvation can heat it up for a treat, or not, to suit their fancy. Often this would see the last of it, but if daybreak showed a decent whack still in the pan, it went into an omelette. The idea of scraping it over the side never entered into our heads. I was introduced to the final word in turning one's back on food waste by the late Harold Hudson, a professional delivery skipper of the old school. When I knew him, Harold used to more or less commute to the Mediterranean from the Solent, delivering boats of wildly varying quality for gentlemen and others. I was living in a mud berth near his, and it was inevitable that I'd ship out on one of these ventures. The yacht in question was a 60-foot wooden classic whose stability derived more from a lead keel than a healthy beam. Predictably, she went to windward like a half-tide rock at an extreme angle of heel. We beat out past the Needles at sunset into a rising sou'wester. Our crew were a hard-bitten lot, and nobody was seasick, but volunteers to knock up supper were not forthcoming. In the end, Harold did it himself, opening a random array of cans and mixing up the contents into a large pressure cooker. An hour later, he served up the unique result in big enamel mugs that burned our fingers, but it warmed us up and filled the gap. There was half a pan left. The next night, we prospected in the pan locker, topped up the remnants with beans and added a few spuds for good luck. On day 3, we'd rounded Ushant and were bashing down the bay. Harold's stew was going strong, so we fried up the last of the mushrooms with a couple of onions, chopped up a large black pudding somebody had found, tipped them in and served it all up again. And so it continued until, still hard on the wind, we rounded Finisterre. As often happens, the wind freed us south of the corner, and we came upright at last. By then we'd a proper 5-day stew still in the same pot. The quality was sumptuous, and we'd never washed up, so we finished it off by tipping in half a can of curry powder. There was no curry left for breakfast, and absolutely nothing had been wasted. Just don't ask what we did with the empty cans. Any sailors with half an ounce of the sense they were born with give careful thought to their victualling lists. Things have changed mightily since Harold's day back in the 1970s, when on-board refrigeration and freezers were for most of us unimaginable. After the first week of a trip, the fresh produce was limited to a few guaranteed keepers. Stowed in a string bag so air could circulate, a big hard cabbage could be relied on to stay good to the end, if eaten leaf by leaf from the outside in. The humble spud might not have been universally popular, but it's surprising what an enterprising sea cook can do with it. I was looking at an old logbook this morning and found that in 3 months, mostly at sea and a lot of it in the tropics, my wife and I consumed 56 pounds of King Alfred's, with only one given the deep six for going rotten. Onions are another winner. A 1/2 weight netting sack of Spanish onions will see an average crew across the Atlantic with some to spare. Like decent veggies, eggs can also go the distance at room temperature. The trick is to insist that they're fresh when you sail. So long as they've come to you straight from the hen, they'll keep for weeks, so go and see Farmer Giles and make the arrangements. I once read that eggs would stay good for ages if the shells were rolled in Vaseline. The theory was that the grease stopped air passing through the semi-permeable membranes and kept out any microscopic pond life that might sneak across with it. Ros and I tried this on our early voyages. It gave us soft hands and the eggs certainly stayed fresh. Later, laziness set in and the Vaseline treatment went by the board, but we still bought fresh and were enjoying a soft-boiled double yolk for breakfast crossing the line 6 weeks later. Dry goods such as rice and flour are okay if purchased north or south of 23 degrees. In the tropics, weevils were once pretty much guaranteed. With today's tidier standards, this is no longer inevitable, but you can't be sure, not even in the English Channel. I bought some sealed packs of pasta in Salisbury, of all places, for a passage to North Africa a few years ago. When one was broken out off the coast of Portugal, there were the pests, as large as life and twice as small, chomping contentedly at my dinner. There's an old seaman's remedy for cleaning rice and pasta of weevils. One thing's certain, you'll never pick them all off by hand. Just when you think you've got the lot, another one always comes peeping out. So here's what you do. Take a large flat pan or a serving dish. Layer in the nice white rice with the nasty little weevils and carefully pour in clean cold water. Not fancying this early introduction to Davy Jones, the bugs float to the surface while the uncooked rice stays put at the bottom. Scoop 'em off and you're home free. There's only one catch. You need to be smart with the scooping. If you leave the weevils floating about until they drown, they sink to the bottom like Pharaoh's host and you're stuck with them. This doesn't work with flour, of course, but you can't have everything. And remember, you heard it first in Sailing Today.